Sabrina 2000s comic, issue 2. The story starts out with Harvey being threatened with a bully who wants his lunch money. Couldn't get any more stereotypical than that. In a normal Sabrina comic, this would be the point where Sabrina would use magic to save Harvey. And there's no reason she wouldn't do that because that's a good use of magic. I'm so shocked that she did nothing to help. Instead, she just helps him stand up, and Harvey keeps telling her to relax about it. If this was the 70s comic, there were so many times where she defended him from beach bullies. And at least it's a bit more interesting to see a bully at the beach instead of at school. Here, she might as well not be a witch at all. She tells him to report him, and he says he's not a snitch. He should explain that he knows he'd get in trouble with the bully if he did. And if the bully didn't get expelled, there'd just be no point. But the bully would always bully him regardless. He'll always be in trouble with him. Sabrina doesn't even say that. Sabrina then makes some fire ants bother the bully. What took so long? In any other Sabrina comic, she would have done this the panel after the bully first showed up. Instead, way too much of our time was wasted depressing us. Also, why is that bully, who's trying to be tough, wearing stupid-looking yellow earmuffs like that? Harvey says that the bully wouldn't bully him if he was a superhero he knows about. You'd think his own girlfriend would know about his favorite superhero already. Also, it was confusing at first that we saw the superhero in the same panel as him in a bunch of light, as if he conjured him up. That's not how you draw correctly in a comic book, because he didn't conjure him up. No, Harvey having magic would be interesting and gutsy and try to make up for the comic's problems. Then he's surrounded with light as he shows her a comic book issue. Why is the artist drawing this if we're not supposed to believe it's actually happening because he's not a witch? Oh, at first I thought Captain Volto is just the most stereotypical superhero ever. But the writer was creative enough to make him a regular guy with no superpowers, who's just a brilliant detective, scientist, and muscular martial arts expert. The last of which Batman already has covered. Also, I'd imagine Batman to be a great detective as well, from what I've seen of the Arkham games cutscenes at least. Sabrina's nice enough to encourage Harvey to achieve those goals and be like him. And he says he'll think about it after he reaches level 20 on his video game. And the game makes Atari sound effects. Sabrina just says boys, as if girls never play video games, and she believes in that. That's sad to see as a gamer. But maybe she's too busy with magic homework to play games. Then later that night, she tells Salem that she bought a copy of Captain Volto to see what Harvey liked about it. That's very nice of her. And progressive because a girl is reading it. Never mind, she thinks it's boring. She says, this guy hits that guy, then they hit more guys. Give me Betty and Veronica any day. Stereotype. I like that just fine. I can't even remember a single plot from Betty and Veronica. I'm sure the comic's more interesting than what she described though. Sabrina dreams about Harvey being the secret identity of Volto and picking up the bully, wanting to beat him up. And because the comic is cowardly, we don't even get to see him hitting the bully. I'm sure superhero comics don't cut away to freaking dust clouds for the fights, because that wouldn't be satisfying to see. I wonder if her dream will become real. Why does Sabrina have to be scared of this dream? The bully clearly deserved it. Instead, it was just a nightmare because there's no end to the amount of people she'll have sympathy for. But to be fair, Harvey was being intimidating, implying that he'd go down the slippery slope the second he was given superhero powers. If this was the 70s Sabrina, she would have just made Harvey into Captain Volto right away. And that'd be good because it'd be much faster pacing, so the story wouldn't be as boring. It's nice of Zelda to tell her to have a nice day, and then ask her if she's alright because she's sleepy after waking up early from a nightmare. Then Sabrina realizes that Harvey suddenly has the strength and speed and agility of Volto. Speed and agility mean the same thing. And didn't the comic just tell us that Captain Volto doesn't have any superpowers? And he's warming up against a punching bag of his bully. How in the hell did Sabrina cast the spell on Harvey in her sleep? And if this was going to happen to Harvey anyways, the story shouldn't have been dragged out with that dream. She should have just been written to do that to him right away to make him beat up his bully, if only for a little while before erasing his memory and turning back to normal. Which she should be able to do right now. Instead, she just wastes time talking and then wonders what she can do. And the dumbass thinks she has to run up to Zelda for help. How about imagine Harvey as he used to be and turn him back to normal with a single point? I think I've realized one of the biggest problems with this comic. It has 3 stories in an issue instead of 4 and comedy pages, which is only the case because all 3 of the stories are padded out to last so long, which makes them more boring and frustrating. Why is Harvey kicking a tree branch off Sabrina's tree? Wouldn't he just go straight to the bully's house? Why are we being shown Sabrina recapping to Zelda what just happened? Oh, for wasting our time. Zelda talks as if dream transferal powers only happen to witches when they reach a certain age. That's stupid. Wouldn't there be a way to make that impossible? Right away, she gives Sabrina some magical powder to blow in Harvey's face and fix the problem because God forbid Sabrina just be able to point at him. As a witch. Who's able to change him in the first place, so she'd clearly be able to just change him back. She flies away on a broomstick as she's happy that she's growing up. Why is Sabrina flying a broomstick instead of a motorcycle or vacuum? Sure, she's a witch, but she always complained that this was too stereotypical. It's like the people who made up the animated series were completely new to the franchise, and that's why they had no idea what they were doing. It's not bad by itself that she's flying on a broom. It looks kinda cool. I'm sure anyone who witnesses it would just have their memory erased by the Spy Witches anyways. It's just baffling to see this after experiencing the series before this. In the sitcom, Sabrina never used the broom and flew on a vacuum instead because even her aunt said vacuums were the way to go now. You'd think they'd be old-fashioned. I have to wonder why the writer thought we were rooting for Sabrina to rescue a bully from Harvey. Sabrina should have explained that if Harvey beat up the bully, he'd get in trouble for assault. But witches can erase memories. She tells Harvey that Captain Volto is a hero, as I wonder why she's letting him talk instead of throwing the powder in his face right away. Or watching the bully get what he deserves and then returning Harvey to normal. And erasing everyone's memory of the event. Sabrina punished the bully herself. Why is she such a hypocrite when Harvey wants to do it? Anyways, the writer is self-aware of how comics usually are, because Harvey explains that the old Captain Volto is a hero, but he's modeling himself after the new, grittier, dark Captain Volto. It seems like even in the comic with the cartoonier art style that's trying to appeal to kids, where Sabrina is discouraged from any kind of magic abuse, it still is going with the idea that Harvey's an asshole. So there's no reason for him to not be her boyfriend, because at least then she'd get to enjoy kissing him. So she'd at least get something out of the fact that Harvey's in the comic. So it would feel more worth it. Out of complete nowhere, though it makes sense, it turns out that Harvey's bully is being bullied. So he's told to hand over the cash. Oh good. Logically, Harvey's gonna rush in and start a fight anyways. I thought they were gonna feel sorry for the bully when this doesn't make the bully a good person. Out of nowhere, again, Sabrina changes her mind and says that Harvey's right this time and lets him throw the bullies in the trash cans. Why aren't we seeing him hit those assholes? Why doesn't the artist realize what the audience wants? If censors are forcing him to do this, then that's fucking embarrassing. I don't remember the other Sabrina comics being like this. At least the bully thanks Harvey for it. Out of complete and utter nowhere, Harvey says he's not gonna beat him up because he's suddenly above stooping to his level, and he's gonna give him a chance to go straight because it's heroic. So, did Sabrina get through to him because he likes her that much? I thought he wanted to be Dark Captain Volto. Why would he want to model himself after a bad guy if he's a good guy? The bully says he'll give back all of the money he took with interest. How would this last? He'd just be forced to get money for these guys again. This wouldn't happen. This ending is a series of confusing plot twists that don't make sense at all. But this comic would probably make it extremely obvious what its twists would be if it did try any foreshadowing. Why didn't Sabrina throw the dust at him the second she could? Not to mention that she's a witch, so she could have used magic to force him to stay still. The story ends with Harvey thinking that the entire experience he had with his powers was just a dream, even though he was standing up when he lost his powers and she blew dust at him right in front of her. I guess him thinking it was a dream is a part of the powder's magic. Couldn't Sabrina have just teleported Harvey to her and thrown the powder at his face right away if the powder would make him dismiss all of the magical stuff as just a dream? She could warp him back home and erase his memory. She could warp him in a herd to his bed and then throw the powder in his face. The plot would have ended much earlier. She could probably turn the bullies nice with a magical potion or something, and that'd be less painful for them, than Harvey throwing them in the trash. But her aunts would think that's an abuse of magic too. In the next story, Sabrina says that she was very enthusiastic about the school bake sale until she realized she had to help with the baking. First of all, why? I don't remember any school bake sale forcing me to bake. Maybe she's a part of a club at school that justifies this. Also, the Sabrina in the 70s comic gladly did some baking. That was more respectable of her because she knew a valuable life skill. This Sabrina either doesn't know how to bake or hates it for no reason. She's only been written like this because she's younger. But I don't consider that to be an upgrade. Salem says it's a nice day out for kicking a soccer ball around. Sabrina reminds me why I hate this comic because she says that she'd get in a lot of trouble if she used magic to zap up a batch of cookies. Why would she get in trouble for that? People like cookies. Whatever happens to, if you've got the power, use it. In the 70s comic, Sabrina's aunts were always the smart, rational ones telling her that she should zap things up instead of buying ingredients and stuff. There's nothing evil about using magic to zap up some freaking cookies. How is this good escapist fiction? If you daydreamed about being a witch, you'd never imagine that you'd be forbidden to use magic for even things that aren't evil at all. Sure, it wouldn't be fair to the other kids that she could make the cookies faster, but what they don't know isn't gonna hurt them. And it's not really a competition, is it? She's not competing with them to prove she can make the most delicious cookies, is she? Even then, she'd only be able to think about the taste of delicious cookies that she's already eaten. So she might not be able to zap up cookies that taste better than other people's cookies that are made with unfamiliar, better recipes. So she isn't guaranteed to win. This comic makes me wish that Della or Enchantra would come down and smack Sabrina's aunts and uncle for raising Sabrina wrong. Della would tell them off in an epic rant that she's supposed to be using her powers. Anyways, at least Salem's trying to get Sabrina off on a technicality, as he's being competent with a soccer ball. Maybe the reason I think it's stupid that he's walking is because I can't imagine that a cat's hind legs would be able to support its weight by walking all the time. Won't its skeletal structure be too weak? There has to be a reason cats are quadrupeds. Anyways, he says that Sabrina could magically animate the equipment to bake the cookies for her. Wouldn't that be disobeying her aunts if her aunts are that stupid? Sabrina somehow says that this is the kind of wacky witchcraft that got Salem turned into a cat. How does this compare to using magic to try to take over the world? Oh good, he does confirm that he tried to take over the world. So the one good thing about the animated series is that they keep that interesting lore about Salem. He says that now he enjoys simple pleasures. I have a question. If he's somehow allowed to keep his powers, then how does he not effortlessly take over the world with them anyways? What were they thinking with that change? I guess he was only turned into a cat as a warning, and he's supposed to know that if he tries to take over the world again, something worse will happen to him. But why wouldn't they just do that something worse immediately? Why did he give the cooking utensils sentience? Why did he make them able to talk and have names? Wouldn't this inevitably backfire? Unless they're brainwashed to only want to do what Sabrina wants, I guess this makes sense. This way they can do the thinking for her. Cooking would require thinking. Sabrina says that she's glad Salem doesn't want to conquer the world anymore. He says that he doesn't have those thoughts anymore, and it's revealed that he was lying because the sentient kitchen utensils want to make enough cookies to cover the world and conquer it. This story looks familiar to me now. Did I have this story as a kid? Why would they think they could conquer the world by covering it with cookies? That doesn't make any sense. They just dismiss that idea and want to do it a different way. But even then, they should know they have no chance of conquering the world. Come on, if even the largest country on Earth hasn't conquered the whole world by now, what chance do they have? While it makes a bit of sense to me that Salem's nostalgia for his goal to conquer the world would find its way into things that he gave sentience because he's using them as his slaves, and that would remind him of subordinates, so this kind of makes sense as a cool idea. Why does magic have to backfire for Salem and Sabrina at almost every opportunity? It's spiteful. It's like the stories are written by someone who hates magic. But it wouldn't come off this way if there were a lot more magical spells in every story instead of every story revolving around just one spell. Then it'd feel like most magic works. Well, even then, I don't see why it backfiring in this particular way should ruin Sabrina's plan, because either way they're making cookies for her. Unless the story is going to be cruel and spiteful enough to destroy all of the cookies they made and force her to make the cookies anyways, make me wonder what the fuck is so great about her being a witch. Actually, does she have any relatives who actually know how to raise a witch properly? Does she have an Aunt Vesta in this comic too? I'd run away to her at that point. Why don't they donate the cookies? So predictably, it turns out that too many cookies were made. Would Salem or Sabrina have told the kitchen appliances exactly how many cookies they needed to make for the bake sale? And they'd be brainwashed to do exactly what they want. So this would never happen. And this would have all been avoided if Sabrina just zapped up the cookies right away. So that's the moral of the story for me. It's not using magic as evil, it's just do the simple spell already. After all, there's no possible way her aunts would ever know that she zapped up the cookies. Unless they were abusive enough to put security cameras around or spy on her with a crystal ball. If they were spying on her though, they would have immediately known what Salem did and avoided this entire plot. Instead, they trusted her to be alone, and look what happened. It really makes me wonder why the aunts didn't take away Salem's powers. If even making cookies is considered magic abuse, then any time Salem ever used his powers would qualify as that too. It also makes me wonder why they even let Salem be around Sabrina. Because they really want to raise her to be a good witch, and this is the comic where Salem tried to take over the world in the past. Why is the oven calling Sabrina and Salem interlopers when the appliances are supposed to think of Salem as their master and be grateful to them because Salem gave them life? They weren't in the kitchen when Sabrina said she wanted to put a stop to this. Sabrina would just zap away all of those cookies. She could zap them all to a homeless shelter or orphanage. That'd be an objectively righteous thing to do, so there's no excuse not to do it. But I guess she doesn't know what any orphanage in her town looks like to warp the cookies to it. But she should think to do that after all of this at least. She could look up an orphanage on Google Maps. The point is, she has no excuse whatsoever for having any kind of problems here. She could easily use her magic to get rid of the cookies and return the kitchen appliances to normal by just pointing and imagining. She's not a 5-year-old here, even though she looks and acts like one, and that would justify her incompetence in this comic a tiny bit better. If the comic thinks it needs padding in every story to make it last long enough, that's no excuse. Why is there padding instead of more things happening in every plot? It's interesting that Salem not only says sorry, but also explains that his thoughts on world domination are genetic. Now I kinda want to see what family members he's referring to. Salem says there's only one way to resolve this. Yeah, zap away all the cookies and return the appliances to normal. Oh no, that'd be logical. Instead he thinks the only solution is to kick a soccer ball and make a cat joke. The soccer ball bounces off tons of stuff in the kitchen, and Sabrina says for no reason that she knows that he's trying to hit the spooky jar. Somehow he casually confirms that, not even looking like he's lying to cover his ass. I thought he was trying to hit one of the appliances. If he was aiming for the spooky jar, he'd hit it right away. Or he'd miss it and have to keep aiming for it. Why doesn't he just point to open the cookie jar? So Spooky gets summoned from the jar. Again, why does he exist? Why is he in this house? Sabrina looks away while cringing and says ew because Spooky's eating the sentient kitchen appliances instead of the cookies. I don't care if you look like Spooky, you're not gonna want to eat kitchen appliances. And you'll be miserable doing that. Sabrina thanks Spooky, who is apparently polite enough to say excuse me. Why didn't Sabrina even think about using the cookies for the bake sale? She was never told they were poisoned. If they were poisoned, they would have killed Spooky. And they could have just summoned something to eat the kitchen appliances. And if she's being raised to be a good witch, then you'd think she would have pointed to make them good. Instead, the story ends with her wanting to bake a pie. And how could Spooky have such a big appetite? The story sucks. Why did the animated series comic have to replace the 90s comic, which was objectively superior? Who cares if that crappy cartoon was out? That didn't excuse it. The RG Sonic comic didn't get cancelled when Sad M was cancelled and replaced with a Sonic Underground comic. Although it would have been interesting to read an Underground comic. If there is one, let me know. We start out the next story with Sabrina wearing winter clothes near snow, telling Salem that it's getting late and he should stop chasing a rabbit and get back on the hiking trail. It makes sense that if Salem wanted to take over the world, he'd also be mean enough to chase a rabbit for no reason. And since he's stuck as a cat, he'd naturally be bored enough to research rabbits. So he'd know the species of this thing on sight. But it not being explained that he looked up rabbits on the internet still makes it seem arbitrary that he knows the species. He goes into a hole with the rabbit, saying that he catches and releases. If Sabrina really wanted to stop Salem, she'd just point at him and float him over to her and let the rabbit get away. This kind of writing isn't taking advantage of the concept of a witch. You might as well have Lizzie McGuire or the protagonist of Braceface be the protagonist. And she just has access to magic because she has magical objects to use. Pixie powder and other powder. It'd be the same thing, and she even kind of looks like them. She goes after Salem saying that the ground gave way underneath them. And the same thing happens to her, and she falls into an underground cavern. She falls into some snow, and Salem warns her to run away from an avalanche. Sabrina explains that the vibrations brought down all the snow on the side of the cliff. And all the time she was talking, she and Salem could have just pointed and made the avalanche disappear. This is all Sabrina's aunt's fault for acting like she's never allowed to use her magic. It means that it's not instinctive for her to think to use it to save her life. She knows she's allowed to use magic as a last resort. Logically, she wouldn't be able to outrun an avalanche, not when it's that close to her. She might get killed eventually, not on screen, but after the events of the comic. What if she gets faced with a mugger who wants to kill her? She wouldn't use magic on him, would she? Well, she used magic on the bully. She's unpredictable because she's a hypocrite. And it would definitely be the right thing to do to point and make the avalanche disappear, because then it wouldn't hurt anybody else. The avalanche seals off the entrance, and the teenage witch is like, duh, now what do we do? You zap away the snow, moron. Make it melt. Salem just wants to chase the hair some more, and he insists that it knows the way out. Sabrina tells Salem to forget chasing it because it's too fast, and Salem listens to her and stops for no reason. Why doesn't Sabrina just use magic to make Salem faster and make herself faster? So the idiots end up lost when they probably might have had a chance of escaping if they did follow the hare. The hare would probably be way more familiar with the landscape if he's native to it. And if the hare didn't know its way out of here, then really there'd be no harm in following the hare. It'd be just as lost as they were. Sabrina asks which way they just came from, and Salem freaks out about being lost. Why is he upset? He says he'll bust off a pointy rock, and then Sabrina could zap it into a rocket that'll shatter the roof. Sabrina for some reason panics and tells him no, because the comic sucks. Why don't they just warp out? Seriously. Maybe this comic would make sense if it was explained that every time a witch uses magic, she drains a bit of her life force and she would die if she used magic too much. And there's very little magic she can get away with using every day. Even then, I'd still be pissed if the wimps were wimpified for no reason, because it would still make for a boring comic that completely ignores the fact that it stars magical people most of the time. Sabrina doesn't say that she and Salem have a curse on them that'll seriously punish them for using magic to get out of here. But even then, you'd think the punishment would be undone after they'd explained to the ants why they had to use magic. Sabrina explains that she learned in school that it takes nature thousands of years to form a stalagmite. So, she says that the limestone cave was made by the encroaching water dissolving it by dripping, and the minerals make stone icicles. So, she says that it's beautiful, and Salem thinks she's gone nuts. She is nuts for not just warping to safety. Even if she's spotted warping somewhere, she just erased the person's memory anyways. She doesn't want to conjure up anything that could destroy this place. Then just warp out of here. Also, if you're a witch, then you could just create a copy of this place. You could fix this place. Salem says that he's several hundred years older than her and outranks her. That's a very good point since Sabrina's an idiot. But she insists that she's his master because he's a cat, even though he was forced to become a cat. And it's uncomfortable to insist you're anyone's master. She hears some squeaking and somehow thinks it's machinery. Instead, Salem has to tell her to get down because millions of bats threaten them. Miraculously, instead of the bats attacking them, the bats just fly out of the cave and leave Sabrina to safety, as she explains that the bats fly out of it at dusk to find food. Salem compliments her for watching nature shows on TV. And Sabrina says she'll race Salem back home for supper. Why isn't she allowed to just warp home? She warped with pixie powder in the last story of the 90s comic, so there's no reason she wouldn't do that again. I wish it was explained in the comic that her aunts want her to get some exercise, and that's why she doesn't get into the habit of teleporting. The story ends with Sabrina eager to tell her aunts all about her adventure, and Hilda nags her to close the door because she wasn't raised in a cave. Normally a person would say, "Weren't you born in a barn?" It should be Zelda saying this. It would be satisfying if the story went on to have Sabrina's aunts tell her that she should have used magic to save herself from the avalanche, And then they could feel guilty when she'd tell them that she's so used to not using magic that she never thought of that. This could be a catalyst to them realizing they've been raising Sabrina wrong. But that'd be good writing. And I guess the comic's not allowed to do that. If the main characters weren't going to use magic at any fucking point, then it should have been a story about Harvey and Chloe instead. The first story, by Mike Gallagher, is about Sabrina giving Harvey super speed and strength, like a superhero he likes. But oh no, not because she did that for him on purpose, after seeing him get bullied. That'd be the Sabrina I know, and be faster. Instead, somehow her merely dreaming about this caused it to happen. Logically, wouldn't this happen all the time? Wouldn't witches be much more dangerous because they can't stop their dreams from magically coming true? It would have been reckless of Sabrina to give Harvey powers on purpose, but I'd forgive it because it'd be in character for her and understandable. And Sabrina's an idiot in this comic anyways. I'd rather be an idiot in a way that makes the story interesting and engaging, not irritating. Sabrina has to go get magical powder from Zelda to return Harvey to normal. I guess it would take too long for her to think about all the traits Harvey usually has to point to him and return him to normal. It'd be much harder to imagine the absence of something, so I can understand her needing a magical powder that's got a specific effect that's a cure to the problem. What's she supposed to do? Imagine Harvey walking at normal speed and saying that he just had a weird dream that he was a superhero? Because he would still be able to walk at normal speed as a superhero. Well, her magic would know what she wants, so it should be able to do that. Harvey gets powers and immediately wants to use them to beat up his bullying revenge, which was already a cliche in the 70s comic. Does he have to be drawn with an evil smirk and be written to say that he's basing his behavior off an evil anti-hero, just to drive home the message that he's stooping to the bully's level? I think everyone would want revenge on their bullies. It doesn't make everyone evil for it. It's just unfair to the audience. If the writer wanted me to root for Sabrina and stopping him from giving his bully what he deserved, it should have been said by her that he'll get into legal trouble if he assaulted the bully, or get expelled. But the bully gets away with doing the same thing to him. I immediately wondered why Sabrina didn't just instantly throw the powder at Harvey as soon as she saw him. If Harvey was just going to dismiss his having superpowers as a dream, without even questioning why time progressed as much as it did, and he didn't remember what happened, then Sabrina could have gotten away with just warping Harvey to her and throwing the powder at him right away, and then lying that Harvey made the decision to go to her house. It won't reveal witchcraft if the giant hole in his memory and the progression of time since he woke up didn't reveal magic. I liked the twist that the bully was being forced by other bullies to get lunch money for them. But it was really confusing that Harvey decided not to get revenge on his bully, and instead throw his bullies in the trash and stand up for him. Because the entire story was building up to him giving the bully what he deserved. It's just there to force feed the message to the audience, when I thought this was supposed to be a comedy franchise. But I guess Sabrina's speech that Captain Volto was a hero got through to him, when it clearly didn't at first. With the second story, you'd expect it to be about a talking cookie because of the name, but instead it's about Salem using magic to make the kitchen appliances able to make cookies for Sabrina on their own, because she somehow thinks she's allowed to have that happen to make them, when she somehow is forbidden from simply sapping up cookies for the school bake sale. This is the kind of thing Belle would be opposed to for being too good. And I guess Salem making people work for him reminded him of his world domination days. That and he was talking about those days, which explains why the appliances had his desire to take over the world when they should know they had no chance of doing so. Let alone by making too many cookies. How would they have enough cookie ingredients to make that many cookies? And somehow, Sabrina doesn't just zap all of the cookies to an orphanage or something, when that would clearly be the right thing to do and would make her a sympathetic character. She's not sympathetic because she's a complete idiot, who doesn't ever consider using the cookies for a bake sale. Instead, she insists on baking a pie after this, after somehow Salem had to miraculously have a kicked soccer ball, hit the spooky jar, and get the appliances eaten by Spooky. Why didn't Salem just use magic to remove the appliance's sentience and most of the cookies in seconds? The third story is about Sabrina getting into a life-or-death situation where she falls into an underground cave because she followed Salem when he's chasing a rabbit, and she has to avoid an avalanche, which logically would have caught up with her and crushed her to death instantly. Except logically, she would have just warped herself and Salem out of the cave right away! The entire story went by without them using a single spell. At that point, Harvey and Chloe should have been the protagonists. How stupid are these characters? Why did Sabrina think that a rocket going through a ceiling and breaking one tiny hole in a cave would destroy the entire cave? I think the reason they didn't just warp out was because Sabrina's dumb aunt had gotten Sabrina so used to not using her magic that she didn't think to use it to save herself. This should have taught them a valuable lesson. At the very least, it should have taught them to come with Sabrina instead of leaving her unsupervised, with no one but Salem as company. And Salem's apparently such a doormat that he just humored her every time, so his magic was useless. How would someone who wants to take over the world be a doormat to someone? Sabrina not using magic doesn't make her realistic and relatable to mortals. It makes her impossible to relate to because she's the biggest idiot I've ever seen. And it's unrealistic for a teenage girl to not use magic whenever she feels like it. Ugh, how many issues of this comic are there? I'm sure there's only gonna be like 30 because it's so bad. 104? Are you kidding me? It does not deserve to have more issues than the 70s comic. I imagine that to be the main Sabrina comic. I don't even know why it got cancelled. This issue is actually pretty memorable. As in, it's been months since I wrote the scripts for these reviews, and I still kind of remembered all 3 of the stories. Even then, the ending to the first story still came out of nowhere to me when I was recording the script.